Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us at today's webinar. Welcome to our sixth webinar under the banner Orient BlackSwan ONE on education. It's absolutely wonderful to see you with us at this event. I am Vani Vasudevan, Strategy Advisor and Director, Orient BlackSwan. We are delighted to introduce our speaker for the day, Mr. Chaz Pugliese. Chaz Pugliese is a charismatic teacher trainer with over 25 years experience and is currently Director of Education at Pilgrims Teacher Training, known for their inspirational teacher training programs, headquartered in the UK, but with a global outreach of influence and impact. Chaz is located in a powerful lineage that includes iconic teachers and trainers such as Mario Rinvalukri, who have blazed their own creative trail and in turn inspired thousands of teachers with their transformative and practical classroom ideas. Chaz is also a co-founder with others including Alan Maley of the C Group or the Creativity Group. He has been the keynote speaker at innumerable conferences and has contributed numerous articles to a range of professional publications. His books include Being Creative, published by Delta in 2010, The Principled Communicative Approach, Helbling 2015, and Creating Motivation, Helbling 2017. For Chaz, creativity and motivation are the two big ideas. True to the Pilgrim's way, he places the individual learner and teacher as human beings first and last at the center of the classroom process. He has often quoted Earl Stevick, and I quote, "Success depends less on materials, techniques, and linguistic analyses, and more on what goes on inside and between people in the classroom." With almost all classroom teaching having migrated online, today's topic of creating motivation becomes critical. Chaz drew attention on Facebook to a YouTube video of an experiment conducted very recently in a few schools in China, wherein students had to wear high-tech headbands that constantly fed data to their teachers, so the teachers would know who's distracted, who's bored, who's tired, and so on. I think as good teachers, we would know without any need for headbands, wouldn't we? Thank you, Chaz, for so readily accepting our invitation to speak. And over to you for your much awaited session on creating a motivating environment online, tips and strategies. Requesting participants to please type in any questions that you may have in the chat box or in the Q&A box. Over to you, Chaz.
Thank you very much, Vani. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Greetings from Paris, where I'm based. It's a pretty dark, gloomy, rainy day here, but that's October, so that's what you would expect if you lived in this part of the world. Thank you, Vani. That was a really nice introduction. Very flattering indeed. Thank you. Indeed, I'm proud to be speaking today on behalf of Pilgrims. Pilgrims, as Vani said, is a pioneer in teacher training outlet, one of the oldest, and certainly one of the most prestigious schools, at least in terms of teacher training and running our own teacher development courses. These are strange times. These are really strange times. You will agree. The challenge for somebody like me, and indeed, my co-workers at Pilgrims, hasn't been so much, to how to migrate online. It hasn't been so much how to teach online. but it's how to teach online humanistically. As Vani said, we believe in the we believe that actually you don't teach students, you teach people. So our humanistic approach is such that we are convinced that if you fail to address the needs of the student, you might get away with that. But if you fail to address the needs of the human being, you will be history because you won't be able to reach out to anybody. So you understand that that's already a challenge, when you're working in the same classroom, when you share the same physical environment with your own students. It's more of a challenge when you work online. But we're also thankful for having the technology. Look, if we didn't have the technology, I wouldn't be here talking to you and having the privilege of talking to you now. So we have to be happy and content with what we have. I hear people say, but it's not the same thing. Teaching online is not the same thing. Well, of course it isn't. But I think that's the wrong way to approach it. So in this talk, I'd like first of all, to outline some of the differences and some of the similarities between teaching online and teaching in a teaching face to face. And I'd also like to move on and tell you how we can actually create a motivating environment online. It may sound paradoxical, it might sound like a contradiction in terms, but I actually do think because I've done it, because I'm doing it. So and that you can and should create a motivating environment online. So I would try I would try to demonstrate to give you a few. I'm trying to give you input. I'm trying to give you ideas, but I would also like to demonstrate, how the input could be transferred into our classroom. Okay, so that's the plan for today, and then I would be very happy to take your questions, if you have any at the end. Um, well, first of all, the first thing, that it's really important to establish that, it's just like in a classroom situation. Okay, it's very, very important, to establish rapport with the people you're dealing with online. Evidently, this is much easier to do it in a classroom. Okay, but again, teaching online and teaching in a classroom is not the same educational experience. I don't think, we should try and, should continue to compare. It's like, comparing, pears with apples. It just doesn't work. It's not the same fruit. Okay, but the needs of the teacher and the needs of the students are actually very, very similar. Whether you work online or whether you work in a classroom, okay, this doesn't change. And the first need, in my opinion, is, being able to actually communicate and connect emotionally, effectively connect with the students. Okay, this is absolutely indispensable. Now, I don't know about your part of the world, but one of the difficulties I've found since I started working online with my university here is that many of my students actually refuse to turn on the camera and turn on the microphone. So I often find myself, just spending 2 hours chatting, typing things up in the chat box, and I often ask myself, what did I teach them? Is that teaching? Now that is complicated, and I for some time I thought, that it might be a question of, connectivity. It might be, some people, have connection, issues with their connections and stuff like that. I'm actually convinced now that it may not always be the case. It may be, that some people are just shy, and interestingly, some people seem to be shyer online than in the classroom. So, but that makes things difficult. And if the students, don't turn on the camera and the microphones, it is very complicated for the teacher, any teacher, to build some kind of rapport. But we have to try. Okay, I will give you a couple of ideas later on. You still need to get the group to bond. Okay, again, easier in a classroom. Okay, but not impossible if you try to do it online. Okay, so people have a need, to actually feel that they belong to some kind of place, some kind of group. Okay, and I think, it is our job as group leaders, okay, to promote this atmosphere of, mutual acceptance, not tolerance, because tolerance is not all that positive if you think about it. But we want to promote, a feeling of acceptance, okay, where people, mutually accept each other's presence and embrace the diversity, okay, that we find in our groups. The One of the major differences I've noticed, by teaching online is that the pace must be different. I think that if you're trying to go online and maintain the same pace that you use in a frontal situation in the classroom, I think this would be it's a recipe for disaster. I think we need to go slower, okay, and I think it's more a question of one step back and three back. Okay, so you're missing all sorts of different clues. Okay, so you can't see the people. Okay, you go or you just have faces, but you don't really see who's with you and who's gone out for a walk. It's very complicated. So I think that the pace must be slower. And another thing that I've noticed, which I think is very, very different from between teaching online and teaching frontally, is that you tend to achieve less online because the pace is slower, because you're constantly preoccupied with the question, are they following me? Are they understanding what I'm saying? Because there is less feedback from the students, okay? Vocal or also, or also physical feedback, okay? It's much less because you can't see the students, okay? At best, you can only see the face. Because of all this, okay, I think that we need to trim our lesson plans, and we need to actually scale down the objectives, and you achieve a lot less in the same amount of time that you would if you were teaching frontally. Okay, so however, the strategies for creating a motivating online environment are the same online and in the classroom. Now, and I want to talk to you about my way of doing this. Okay, and this is something that I developed. The framework I'm just about to introduce you to is something that I developed. After doing some local research. I believe in the value of local research. Okay, I don't teach in India. I don't teach in Japan. I teach in France. Okay, so my students are mostly French, mostly Parisians. Okay, but we have multilingual and often very international groups. But essentially, I'm dealing with French people, so I have to pay attention to the specific context, okay, in which my teaching is taking place. So I have to say before I start talking about my research that for a long time I used to ask myself the wrong question about motivation. And the question I used to ask myself was, how do I motivate my students? As if motivation is something that gets done to you, as if motivation is as if the teacher had a magic Harry Potterish wand, to basically switch on the student's motivation. I wish. It doesn't work like that. Motivation is a very personal, very subjective phenomenon. Okay, so I realized that I was asking myself the wrong question, and luckily I had this flash of inspiration one day, and I replaced that old question with another one. Okay, and which seems to me, to be making much more sense even today. And the question is, how do I create a motivating environment whereby the students can actually motivate themselves? Now, this is, in my opinion, this is a much better question to ask. And that's what I've been working on for the last 5 or 6 years. And so prior to writing this book that Vani very kindly mentioned in our introduction, Creating Motivation, I asked my students, well, not all of them, but I asked about 135 of my students two very powerful questions, very simple but very powerful. Question number one was, how do you what is something that we do in class that you find particularly motivating? An idea, an exercise, okay? The way I behave, the teacher behaves, what is something that you find motivating? And also, what is something that you find demotivating? And so, as usual, what the students came up with, was an eye opener. I have to say that, what this was this was an interview. Okay, it's an interview that I ran in French. Okay, because I didn't want them to feel like that I wanted to give them the impression that this wasn't this had nothing to do with our English class, but I was really interested in their opinions. And when based on what the students answered, I then developed, a framework which I called GPS. GPS stands for group, priming, and stimulation and surprise. And that's basically, I think, how a teacher, how I do it anyway. And if I stick to the GPS framework, I would then create a motivating environment. Okay, so motivation is a very complex, vast area. Okay, and I think that we often get confused between lack of motivation or lack of interest or lack of energy, apathy. I think they're not the same thing. A lack of interest, okay, it could be temporary. A lack of motivation is much more serious. Okay, so we also have to distinguish between demotivation and amotivation. Demotivation is not so serious. Demotivation means that the students, were motivated at the beginning of your class, okay, and they kind of lost their motivation due to what? I don't know. Maybe they're going through a rough time, but maybe they don't like the way you teach. Maybe they don't like the book. Maybe they don't like the materials. Maybe they don't like the exercises. Maybe they don't like the group that they're in. There is a host of different issues flying all over the place. Okay, but demotivation is not very serious because it just means that that you can help the students recover, okay, and retrieve their initial motivation. What's worse than demotivation is amotivation. Amotivation basically means that the students don't want to be there in the first place. Learning English is not their idea. It may be the parents' idea, okay? It may be somebody else's idea, but they don't have that fire burning in their belly. So you can teach until the cows come home, okay? But you won't get anything from these students. And then I think, there's very, very little you can do. You know the old saying, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. Well, I think, that is applicable, to this situation here. So what do? You can't learn English for them. So you can try. Of course, you can try everything under the sun. You bend over backwards and you find, exercises that are interesting, original, creative, surprising, you name it. But if the student ultimately doesn't want to learn, there is precious little anybody can do in terms of, trying to infuse motivation into them. Okay, so I just wanted to give you a little background because motivation is a huge area. Um, so let me break it down for you. Okay, so let's go back to my framework, and that's GPS, as I said. So the G stands for group processes or group dynamics. It basically means that we all need to find ourselves comfortable, okay, in the group we're in, okay, the group we're in, if we want to perform well. This goes, way beyond the classroom. Okay, this is true for anything you do in life. Just imagine that tonight I have to join a yoga class and I've never done yoga in my life. Okay? I haven't managed to convince any of my friends to come with me. I don't know anybody in the group. I don't know the instructor. Okay? So, really, what am I doing? What am I thinking? This is what I'm thinking. What if I'm not good at this? Okay, what if the other people are better than me? What if the instructor doesn't like me? What if I don't like the instructor? What if the group doesn't accept me? What if I don't get along with anybody? So there is a lot of negativity flying all over the place. There might be some positive aspects in the sense, that some people might be looking forward to a new experience. Okay, but I think that by and large, okay, we would have negative feelings about joining a new group. Okay, and this is very normal. Okay, that's how human beings operate. Okay, we all like our cocoon. Okay, we all like to be in our comfort zone. There's nothing wrong with being in the comfort zone. Let me just clarify that. The problem though is that if you want to learn something new, so if you want to find yourself in the learning zone, you have to step outside the comfort zone. This is how we learn how to ride a bicycle when we're kids. If you look at a child, how does he or she learn to ride a bicycle? They never fall off? Of course they do. So they accept the fact, they're going to fall off the bicycle. They accept the risk. Okay, so they accept the fact that they need to get out of the comfort zone, not not riding a bicycle, into the learning zone, learning how to ride a bicycle. Even that entails, falling off the bicycle and getting a few scratches. That's the way it is. Okay, so so this is precisely, the way students feel, okay, when they join a class. And that's the same thing whether they join a class online or whether they join a class in a physical building. It's pretty much the same thing. I would guess, though, that it's even more the case when people don't know each other and they've joined a class online for the first time. So it is incumbent on us, it is an absolute obligation for the teacher, okay, to promote a sense of bonding, a sense of, affiliation. You want people to feel like they've found a place. Okay, you want people to find common ground. You want people to find that, okay, well, yes, this is my group. I'm already looking forward to next class. Because if you don't promote affiliation, that is to say, a sense of belonging, okay, the opposite of affiliation is alienation. And can you just imagine, trying to teach somebody who feels alienated, who feels like, they don't belong to the group? Okay, you will be wasting your precious time because, those people will be an outcast. They haven't found, this person will be an outcast. These people, won't have felt as if, they've found their place in the group. But remember, if you don't do it, if you don't create a motivating environment, nobody else is going to do it for you. The book author is not going to do it for you. Your manager is not going to do it for you. The group itself, they're not going to do it for you. You have to be the one to actually promote that sense of belonging. How? By asking the students to do a variety of different exercises, okay, that basically combine a language learning element, because we teach language, okay, while at the same time they reach a little deeper and get the students, for example, to find common ground. Finding common ground is something that group psychologists advise us to do. If you want to promote a sense of well-being in a group, if you want to promote a sense of trust, mutual respect, acceptance, if you want to promote, a low stress, or no stress atmosphere, well, then, you need to promote, you need to help people, with exercises, that get them to find and discover common ground. This is the same in anything we do. Let me let me give you an example. Imagine tonight I'm hosting, I'm giving a dinner party, okay? And I'm inviting 15 people, say. Okay, now some of these people know each other, but most of them don't know each other. Now, if I know, if I know that two of my guests are both teachers, okay? What do I do? What does a good host do? I walk up to them and I say, oh, you two, you have something in common. You both teachers, or you both teach English. And so I help them strike up a conversation. So I've given them the common ground. And then, I can guarantee you that once people found common ground with one another, they will talk up a storm. Okay. So that's what we do when we want people to break the ice. Okay, you want people to feel more comfortable. Okay, so I'm going to give you an example of a couple of exercises I do, which I hope you might want to try with your own classes. These exercises don't require any material at all. Okay, so there's an exercise that I do is I ask the students to work in pairs or to work in small groups, depends on how many students you have in your classrooms. Okay, and I give them 3 minutes to find three similarities and three differences that they have one another. Okay, beyond the obvious. Okay, so if they say we're both women or we both wear glasses, that's not, it's not going to get the conversation very far. They need to go a little deeper, and so they need to share their interests, their hobbies. Okay, perhaps schools they went to. Okay, whether they have pets, whether they good cooks and stuff like that. Okay, so the idea, once again, is to push them to ask each other questions, to socialize and find common ground. And when you do an exercise like this, okay, it always strikes me to see how people care. You stop them because it's time to move on, but people carry on. Once you found something in common with somebody else, you just don't want to stop. You know why? Because you're not a student anymore. You react as a human being. So again, the dinner party example. If you go to a dinner party and you've met somebody who seems to have the similar interest to you, okay, then you find that thing in common, okay, and you just don't want to stop talking. Okay, that's the way we are, because we found something to talk about. We bonded, and so that's how we should do it. I'm going to give you another exercise, which is very simple. Look, and all you do is this. I don't know if you could see that. Okay, you ask the students, okay, to draw 3 columns on a piece of paper. In column 1, they write me. In column 2, they write not me. And in column 3, they write me occasionally. Okay, so me, not me, occasionally me. And then what you do is you read out a series of activities. Okay, and if you say something that if what you say describes who the students are, the students write it down in the first column. For example, if I say I'm a coffee person, okay, if you are a coffee person, you write it down in the first column. If I say I never shop online, okay, if that describes you, if you never shop online, you write it down in the second column. Okay, or if you do shop online occasionally, well, you write it in the third column. Once you've given them 10 or more items for them to think about. So for example, I've never cooked for more than 15 people. Me, not me, occasionally. I don't know. I'm a bookworm. I read more than five books a month, for example. Okay, well then that's me. Okay, so and so on and so forth. Once you've gone through the items, okay, you get the students to work in pairs or in small groups, depending on the number of students you have. Okay, and the students share their items, and inevitably they will find common ground with one another, and inevitably they're going to continue to talk about this. So so what's the follow-up to this? The follow-up is that you ask the students in pairs or again in small groups, okay, to speculate about the teacher. So if the students think that I'm a coffee person, they write it in the me column. Okay, if the students think that I don't shop online, they write it in the not me column. Okay, so basically the students don't know me. So this is total guesswork. Okay, but it's fun because then I reveal the answers. Okay, and so the ice is broken. Okay, we have a laugh. Okay, there is some humor, and people, are beginning to relax. This is particularly useful on the first day of a course when the group hasn't formed yet. Okay, but this group dynamics business, this group processes business, okay, it's something that we have to go back to even if you've been with the same group for weeks. Group dynamics is called dynamics because it's a roller coaster. So it's very much like motivation. The fact that your students are motivated on a Monday morning when you first see them doesn't mean that they're going to stay motivated the rest of the week or the rest of the month or the rest of the academic year. So motivation is a dynamic phenomenon, just like group processes. A group is by definition dynamic because human beings go through phases. Human beings never stay the same. If you're going through some hard time at home, obviously, you're going to take all that baggage with you in the classroom, evidently. Okay, so this is what the G in the acronym stands for: group processes, group dynamics. I just want to quote what one of my students said, okay, when I interviewed him. He said, I find motivating exercises that promote a sense of friendship. I like motivating. I'm motivated. I find motivating when we do exercises that promote a sense of friendship, which is a pretty strong statement to make if you think about it. Okay, so they don't obviously they want to practice the language. They want to learn the language because that's what they're here for. But they want to learn the language and practice the language and experience the language in a nice, stress-free, cooperative, collaborative environment. Okay, so that's it. That's the first G. I want to move on to the P now. Okay, and again, remember, This is, you could do it online, okay? In fact, pretty much every single exercise that I'm going to demonstrate, okay, it can be done online, okay, no problem. The P stands for priming. Priming basically means getting your students ready for you, getting the students ready for English class, okay? Now, this is particularly complicated nowadays because I never really believed that there was a golden age for education. I've always thought that the teaching is, if done right, okay, can be very difficult. It can be very rewarding. Fortunately, it is rewarding, at least emotionally, if not financially. But it's also hardworking. And one of the challenges that we've always had, okay, is how to get the students to pay attention to us. Now, this is more of a challenge in the 21st century because people seem to be more prone to distraction than they were perhaps before the advent of social media and WhatsApp and all the technological paraphernalia that you can imagine. So our job, as T.S. Eliot said once, our job is to distract somebody, distract the students from distractions with another distraction. So my job is to provide more distractions so that the students, forget their distraction and they're distracted in the sense, that they pay attention to what's going on in class. Let's focus on the meaning of the word attention. Attention basically works like this. Okay, you have one stimulus on one hand. Okay, for example, you're thinking about a WhatsApp chat that you had with your friend. Okay, that's one stimulus. And then the other stimulus is the English class. Now, when the students come into the room, into the classroom, okay, they may well be paying attention to the WhatsApp conversation that they just finished having before walking into your classroom. Now, the fact that they're with you physically doesn't mean, unfortunately, that they're with you psychologically and mentally. So they may be ready physically for you because they showed up. Okay, but that doesn't mean that they're ready to do work. Okay, so if you start teaching when the students are not paying attention to the here and now, you are wasting your precious breath. It's a total waste of time. Okay, so if you ask your students to pay attention, okay, and you start teaching, you are wasting your time. It's not because you ask the students to pay attention to you that they will. Okay, you have to help them. You have to help them forget the WhatsApp stimulus and focus on the English class stimulus. So focus is another big word. Okay, and hyper focus would be even better. So when the students come to see you, because they're distracted by, they may be thinking about a test that they just taken, or a test that they're going to take after your English class. They may be thinking about, I don't know, sports results, all sorts of different things. Okay, so they're scattered focus. The focus is totally scattered. Okay, they're not really paying attention to what's going on in class with you. What you want is, you want to help the students, okay, make the shift between the scattered focus to hyper focus. Hyper focus is when the students forget about the stuff that they experienced just before walking to the classroom and paying attention to the here and now. So the question is, how do you do that? Well, I'll tell you what is the worst thing to do. The worst thing to do is to start a class with a linguistically challenging exercise if you know or if you suspect that the students are not focused, because you're setting them up for failure. If you really want to help the students, okay, if you understand that the students are not focused, well, then you have to help them focus. Incidentally, one thing, well, I don't know if we have time to talk about this, but one thing that is motivating, or that contributes to building a motivating environment online or in the classroom, is very much the way we communicate with our students. I'll give you an example. How many times I could still kick myself for the number of times I used to ask my students, when they walk into a classroom and they looked a little bit, tired. So, oh dear, you look tired today. And maybe it's true. Maybe, out of 20 people, 18 are tired, or 19. But what about, the one person, the one student who's not feeling tired? and who's actually looking forward to the lesson, how do you think he or she's going to behave once they know that the teacher thinks, that they're tired? Obviously, okay? If a student thinks that the teacher believes that they're tired, they're going to behave as if they're tired. So you see, so that's really the motivating behavior on our part. So what is the best question to ask? Well, I ask my students now if I suspect, that their energy level is not quite where it should be at. Okay, so I ask them, okay, so on a scale from 0 to 5, how much energy do you have? And they may say 1, they may say 2, they may say 4, okay? But I let them come from them. So I don't jump to conclusions, okay? I don't jump to conclusions, and I respect their answer for what they are, all right? So if they say 3, if they say 1, maybe I would need to shuffle things around in my lesson plan and do something on my feet, because that's what teaching is. Teaching is not about planning your lesson and hoping that this is how it's going to work. Okay, your beloved Dr. Prabhu. Okay, he says that teaching is at best. Okay, sorry, teaching is at most hoping for the best, which means that basically, a lesson plan is wishful thinking. Okay, you can be planning your lessons until 3 o'clock in the morning. Okay, but if you think about it, okay, you have no idea one whilst you're planning your lessons if the students are going to have the right level of energy, the right level of enthusiasm, okay, for doing the activities, for doing the exercises that you're planning them for tomorrow. You see, so teaching is something that's got to be done spontaneously, and you need to be able to feel the group. And so priming your students, getting them ready for you mentally, psychologically, physically, is part and parcel of what you have to do. So how do we do it? Well, look, I'm going to give you a very simple exercise. Okay, you put students together in pairs. Okay, A's and B's. You ask the A's to count from 1 to 60 slowly. 1, 2, 3, 4. At the same time, the B is going to count down from 60 to 1. So when the A is going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the B is going 60, 59, 58, 57. The idea is that they have to start and finish on time. So if one speeds up, the other one has to catch up. Okay. If the other one is a little bit sluggish, if one is sluggish, the other one has to slow down a bit. But the idea is, that they have to listen to each other. And whenever I do an exercise like this, okay, I see the people going like this: 3, 4, 5, 6. So eyes squeezed closed, tight. Okay, and this look of real concentration on the face, as if they were doing, I don't know, open heart surgery or something with their eyes open, I suppose. Are you so? Now the question you may ask is, okay, what's that got to do with language teaching? This is not language practice. Quite right. I don't want my students to practice any language. I don't want my students to do anything linguistically challenging if I suspect that they're not ready for us. But what this little exercise promotes is focus. You can't do this exercise, okay, if you're thinking about your WhatsApp chat before class or your test that you're going to have to take after class. So you're promoting a sense of focus, which incidentally can also be done halfway through the lesson. It doesn't have to be at the beginning. Whenever you think there is an attention slump, okay, well then it's a good time to get the students to do something like this. All right. So that's one exercise. Another exercise that I like to do when I think that the students may need a little bit of when I need to jazz things up a bit is to use movement. I want to introduce you to one of my favorite people on earth, Dr. Joan Ratey. Dr. Joan Ratey is a cognitive psychologist at Harvard University. He's written many books. There's one in particular that I think is really relevant to what we do. The book is called Spark. Spark is about the importance of movement in any learning situation. In the book, Ratey describes a, study that he carried out with 50 language learners. That's why I'm quoting it for you here, because I think it's particularly relevant to us educators. What he did was, he took 50 language students, he controlled everything, same level, age, gender, teaching methods, teaching, learning environment, teaching materials, and it controlled everything. What it did was it split them up into two groups, Group A, Group B. And then he gave them the same, exactly the same vocabulary test. Now, the Group A, before taking the test, they were asked to do a 3-minute physical exercise, a 3-minute jog on the spot. 3 minutes, okay? And then they did the test. Group B, they were given the test, but they weren't asked to do any physical exercise. And the study was replicated 5 times in different situations in different continents, in fact, okay, with incredible results and very similar. What Rady found that the group that did the physical exercise before taking the test performed between 25 and 32% higher. 25 and 32%. It was a vocabulary retention test. Okay, so and according to Rady, the explanation is purely biological. He says, that when we engage in physical exercise, our brain gets more blood. Okay, so the parts of the brain that are responsible for language storage and language retrieval, okay, they are flooded with blood, and so they perform much more efficiently. So, if you want to promote focus, okay, I think the very good thing to do is to actually get the students to do some physical movement. Okay, no language is required. Okay, and the exercise shouldn't take half an hour, obviously. Okay, 1 minute, 2 minutes. Okay, get them to sort of get them out of the seat. Okay, and get them moving. Okay, jump up and down. Okay, and then they sit down and they're ready to tackle whatever it is that you're doing in class. Try it. The question, if you do this for the first time, that you're going to be asked the question, excuse me, sir, what's that got to do with language teaching? And I don't think I don't think we should feel intimidated. I still ask that, I get asked that question all the time. The French students I teach, France is a very conservative country when it comes to educational policies. Okay. And so the French students I teach, they always ask me, excuse me, why are we doing this? And I think it's a perfectly legitimate question to ask. And when they do, you know what I say? Well, I tell them exactly what I told you. I tell them about John Rady. Not only do I tell them about John Rady, but I go on Wikipedia and I show them in class the Wikipedia entry for John Rady, which is going to be in English. So they don't know it, but they're doing some reading comprehension in disguise because, we're going to read what Wikipedia says about John Rady. But I'm not going to stop there. I'm going to go to John Rady's website, okay, and I'm going to click on a couple of interviews with them, okay, so they don't know, but they're doing some listening comprehension work, okay, while they listen to John Rady's explanation of his theory. You see what I'm saying? So I don't feel that I don't I don't feel as if the students trying to give me a hard time. I know what I'm doing. I know where this is coming from. But remember, when you ask the students, to do physical movement, this shouldn't take half an hour. Okay, this should be short and sweet. Okay, it should have, it should serve a very specific purpose, and that is, to get the students going if there's an attention slump. Okay, so that's what priming is all about. Remember, the fact that you're primed, the fact that you're physically, mentally, psychologically ready for your students doesn't necessarily mean that the students are ready for you. If they are, bingo, great, don't change anything. But if they aren't, and in my experience, they hardly ever are, especially at the beginning of a class, especially if the class is at 8 o'clock in the morning, especially if the class is late in the afternoon, especially if the class is right after lunch, okay, well then you must do something about it. Because if you don't, the students will behave as if they're demotivated, but in fact, motivation, there is no, this is not a question related to motivation. This is a question of the students simply not being ready for you. So the quote I'd like to share, okay, this is one of my students, Mathilde. She said, when I asked her, what do you find motivating? She said, I hate it when you start and we're not ready for you. I'm quoting verbatim. I hate it when you start teaching and we're not ready for you. What is the problem here? The problem here, I don't know what the in your particular context, but in France, often, you only have 1 hour. Okay, sometimes if you teach in middle school or high school, sometimes you have 50 minutes. Now 50 minutes just flies by in a flash. So because a teacher knows that he has a very short time for teaching, okay, they rush and they go through all sorts of, if they have 15 exercise to do, they go through all 15 of them, because otherwise it's almost as if haven't taught them anything. But let's wait a minute. Okay, let's think about it for a minute. Okay, is teaching a question of going through the material without stopping to ask, okay, what are they getting out of this? If they're not ready for me, okay, I can fire 15 or 20 exercises at them, but they won't have learned anything. Isn't it a question of less is more? I'd rather do 2 exercises and make sure that the students are with me and they're performing maximum. So I want to maximize learning opportunities, but if the students are not ready for me, I'm actually minimizing learning opportunities. So I'm setting them up for failure. I want to set them up for success. And if I don't do it, okay, nobody else is going to do it. Remember, students are not going to say to you, excuse me, sir, can't you see I'm not ready for you? Excuse me, sir, can't you see I'm still thinking about the WhatsApp conversation I had with my boyfriend? Students don't talk like that. So it's up to us to anticipate these things. So you need to make eye contact. I spell eye contact, I like the pronoun contact. So it's not just I like the eyes, okay? But for me, to make eye contact means, to build rapport. So when I look at the students, okay, I need to seize them up. I need to have a snapshot of what exactly they're thinking, and the way they're behaving, the way they sit in the chairs, okay? So let's not get mixed up between lack of motivation and lack of something else. I want to tell you a little story, because I think this illustrates really well what I'm talking about. Not long ago, about 2 years ago, I was teaching a public speaking skills course at a university here. Actually, business. It was a business school, not a university. Sorry. It was a very high level, and I noticed, at the end of it was a 3-hour class. There was a guy, sitting in the back, and he never really made eye contact with us. He he looked totally aloof. He was looking out the window, doodling on a piece of paper, fidgeting in his phones. He never said anything, he never did anything. So the first time I didn't say anything. The second class, okay, he did exactly the same. He behaved exactly the same way. He never paid attention to what was going on. He seemed strangely absent. Okay, but this time at the end of the second class, I walked up to him and I had a chat with him in French. I said, I noticed that you don't really you don't really seem to be enjoying these classes. And he stopped me, he cut me off, and he said, no, no, but you're wrong. I enjoy these classes. It's just, that I find it really hard to sit for more than 45 minutes. Okay. I need to move. I need to be able to move around. If I don't move around, it's almost as if, I get claustrophobic. All right. So I had to deal with them. I said, okay, fine, I can understand that. I said, okay, why don't we make a deal then? I said, from now on, whenever you feel like you want to stand up and stretch your legs, you don't have to ask for more permission. Okay, you're not allowed to leave the room. You're not allowed to distract the group. Okay, but you can get up, and stretch your. You can even lie on the floor, no problem. Okay, go walk to the window, no problem, as long as you don't disrupt the class. And I said, when I have to wipe off the board, can I count on you? You should have seen the look on his face. Okay, this guy changed from this to this, night and day. Okay, so what I had misinterpreted, what I had misread as lack of motivation, turned out to be that the guy wasn't being given the opportunities that he was craving for physical movement. For how many. I knew he was telling me the truth, because I had seen him in the lobby talking on the phone and pacing the floor like a lion in a cage. He was walking back and forth. You know how some people, when they speak on the phone, they're really kinesthetic. They move. And that's the way he was. So I knew he wasn't fooling around. I knew he was telling me the truth. So that's how I did it. And that's what a teacher, as a group leader, has to do. Teachers are often very shy of, being called leaders, but we are. We are. We are group leaders. Leaders, with a small L maybe, but we are leaders nonetheless. Remember, if no nobody else is going to do it for us, you're in charge. So that's what a teacher does, in my opinion. So that's for P. Okay. There are many other exercises you could do around P, but I want to move on because time is ticking. Okay. So um, I want to share another quote. Okay, moving on to the S now. The S is the surprise and stimulation. A student of mine said when I interviewed him about the motivating exercise, he said, I have a brain, I want to use it. So I have a brain, I want to use it. That's how he put it. Okay. And when I asked him what he meant, he said, well, I don't just want to do work on gut feel exercises or substitution drills and stuff like that. I find that really boring. That's what I did in school for 10 years, and it didn't help. You know, that was his diagnosis. Well, did I disagree with that? Of course not. I think he has a point. Okay, what this guy wants, and what most people I teach want, is they want exercises that go beyond the language mechanics. So I've always said that the most successful, the most pedagogically successful exercises are exercises that blend an element of language learning, because they're here to learn language after all. Okay, but they also want to be taken beyond the language mechanics, and I think I understand why, and I'd like to tell you why. I think that human beings are always constantly on a quest for some kind of emotional response. We're always looking for emotional thrills. That's why we go to the museum. Okay, that's why we go to an exhibit. That's why we listen to music. Okay, that's why we go to the movies. That's why we read books. Okay, that's why we listen to music. Okay, we always seeking experiences that could provide us, with some kind of emotional thrill. And I think that students, perhaps not all of them, certainly the students that I talk to, I think the students, are interested in lessons, that provide them, with something else than just language. I remember once, my first year ever, in fact, as a teacher, I was still in England, and this Japanese woman, a mature lady in her 50s, she waited until the end of a class, and then she came up to me and she to thank me, and she said, thank you, because today you've I discovered something about myself. Wow. Can you think of a better compliment for a teacher? I just thought, I taught a lesson on I don't know, I can't remember what we did. It was a vocabulary lesson, but evidently, whatever we did in class that day must have resonated with her. So for a mature adult to come up to you and say, thank you, today I discovered something about myself I didn't know before. Okay, so that's exactly the kind of thrill that they're looking for. I'm sure this lady never forgot that lesson, not because of me, but because what we did in class. Okay, that must have hit her somewhere. Okay, somewhat. And so that's what I'm talking about. And so hence the need for stimulation. What kind of stimulation am I talking about? Well, cognitive, so intellectual, but also affective, emotional. So I'm going to give you an example. I could, if I work a lot with, it's not upside down, is it? Okay. I work a lot with pictures of works of art. Okay, so this is an exercise. It's a very simple exercise I do. Okay, so I hold up this picture, and incidentally, as you can see, it can be done online as well. I hold up this picture, okay, and I ask the students, to write down on a piece of paper, okay, the three most essential features of this picture, and then three features that are important but not so essential, and three features of this picture that are not so important. So three most important features, important but not so essential, okay, and not very important. They do it individually and then they share. Okay, now if you think about it, what you're doing is, you're pushing the students not only to use language, but to go a little deeper, because when you're asking students to prioritize, you're asking the students, you're asking anybody in fact, to use their thinking skills. Prioritizing is what we do when you do a when I mean, if you work on a shopping list prior to going down to the shopping mall, okay, and you put down, I don't know, flour, sugar, rice and stuff, okay, you are using thinking skills, because you are selecting, you're deciding what goes in, but you also deciding what goes out. So that those are thinking skills, because you're prioritizing. And so this is why when a student finds an exercise that is richer, okay, in terms of language, but also in terms of something else, in terms of reaching out, to the real world, the learning, the language, and the exercise is going to be much more memorable. So this is what I mean by stimulation. Okay, so you could do it, with also with a piece of music. Okay, you could play 2 minutes of instrumental music. Okay, ask the students to close their eyes. Okay, and then tell you the three most essential features of this music, of this piece of music. It may be the instruments. Okay, it may be, I don't know, it may be the pace. It was nice and soothing, for example. Okay, and then three features that are important but not so essential. Okay, and then three features that were not essential at all, that were not important at all, and then the students share. So evidently, from a language learning point of view, there is a lot of speaking, and there's some writing too. Okay, and listening, because the students will be listening to each other. But the exercise, the real aim is to provide the students with the richer learning experience. That's what I'm talking about, and that's what S means. Incidentally, when I ask the students, to tell me an example, to give me an example of a lesson that is of an activity that is demotivating, okay, that what they find demotivating in classes, gap fill exercises, exercises that are monotonous, exercises that are routine, exercises where they understand, that they can go on automatic pilot, okay, exercises where they're not challenged. So, what is challenge? You challenge your students, okay, when you put them in a situation of basically say, okay, this is how much language I have, this is what the exercise is asking me to do, I can do it. So the students, they have a perceived sense of competence. I can do it, I want to do it. So stimulating the students by providing them, with an exercise that asks them to tap into the sense of competence is absolutely fundamental. By sense of competence, I mean this. Look, if you wanted to teach me, I don't know, Hindi, okay? I don't know a word of Hindi, okay? No, but if you, on top of that, you choose a gardening magazine or a cooking magazine in Hindi, I would switch off completely, because I'm not a competent cook and I'm not a competent gardener. I'm not interested. However, if you took a tennis magazine, not cricket, I'm sorry, I'm not a big fan of cricket. I don't understand cricket. Maybe I have to come to India to understand the rules of cricket, but I know it's a great game. But if you take a tennis magazine, okay, or a music magazine. Now, I'm a big fan of tennis. In fact, I play tennis, and I've been playing tennis all my life. So I have some kind of degree of competence. So because you're giving me the sense of competence, because you're making me work within a sphere that I'm familiar with, okay, and I feel fairly competent in, I want to do it. I'm ready to make a bigger effort, okay, to learn one or two words in Hindi related to tennis. You see what I'm saying? And so this is how you stimulate your students. How many times have I seen great lessons on paper, being taught by teachers, to students, and the lessons never really took off. In fact, they were totally disastrous. Why? Because the teacher never really thought about what the students wanted. I remember one on flowers and plants. Okay, it was beautifully planned, and the teacher had a lot of material. She brought into the classroom, different samples, plants and flowers, pictures. She had everything. It was a show. It was a museum, a class. Okay, but the lesson never really took off. And so when we had the feedback session, I asked her, she was, of course, she was devastated. I said, but why don't you think it went well? Because it didn't go well. And she said, I don't know. I have no idea. I said, well, did you know if your students were interested in flowers and plants? And she said, no, I have no idea. Well, that's your answer then. The students were asked to operate in a situation where they have no sense of competence. Where there was no sense of perceived competence. In psychology, this is called self-efficacy. Yes, I know about tennis. Yes, I want to talk about tennis. Yes, I can talk about tennis, even in a language that I don't understand. You see what I'm saying? So that's the S for you. Okay, we're running out of time, so surprise for me is, is surprise, not shock. Incidentally, you don't want to shock your students, but you want to surprise them. If you don't surprise them, it's routine. Routine is our public enemy number one in the classroom. If the students feel like everything is routine, they know exactly what to expect, they switch off. So you need to keep them on their toes. How? By breaking some rules. So if you change the way you've done something, for example, if you've always done something, a certain way, change it. Or do the opposite of something that you've done. Okay? When you do a reading exercise, if you always use the questions in the book, okay, don't. Get the students, to write down their own questions before they actually read the text, for example. Okay? So, and there are many other ways of doing it, but we're running out of time and I don't want to keep you. So, to recap, everything I've said in this very short encounter, okay, can be used both in the classroom and online. In fact, as you can see, okay, this is I've tried to demonstrate, okay, some of the activities that work really well both online and in the physical environment. So motivation is as we said at the beginning, okay, it's a vast, complex area, but it's also fascinating because it's about trying to understand what makes your students tick. And understanding what makes your students tick, it's our responsibility as teachers. If we don't do it, nobody is going to do it for us, and we're running a big risk of doing something in class that the students can't relate to, either intellectually or affectively, emotionally. And if they do, great. If they don't, they will behave as if they're not motivated, but that's got nothing to do with motivation. If you do so, you haven't created a motivating environment. Creating a motivating environment means getting the students to bond. So making them feel psychologically secure, safe, okay? Getting the students ready for you and getting the students stimulated cognitively, emotionally, and keep them surprised. That's what I'd say. It's not a magic fix. I'm not saying this is always going to work, okay? But it is a trial and error. All we have to do is experiment. I look at my classroom as a laboratory, okay? My classroom is a workshop. I have no answers. I have questions. And I often try to get the students, to answer the questions for me because, often I'm at a loss. Teaching is done by people, with people, for people. It's an interpersonal endeavor. All sorts of stuff could happen. There is no fixed way of doing things in class. Your Kumara Divelo talks about the necessity of going beyond methods. I totally subscribe to this view. We need to move beyond method. We need to look at our own classes as laboratories, okay, and run sensible experiments with your students without treating them as guinea pigs, but run sensible pedagogical experiments. Okay. Thank you very much for your hospitality. Thank you, Vani and Sudha and the Orient BlackSwan for your kind hospitality. And I look forward to your questions.
Questions? Yes, yes. Thank you, Chaz. It was an amazing session. And I'm sure, that all teachers present can apply your GPS framework, your group, priming, surprise, and stimulation framework to effect motivation in their online environment. In fact, the new education policy, the national education policy in India 2020, advocates doing away with rote learning altogether. And so learner engagement becomes imperative in our teaching methods. I'm sure the participants have plenty of questions. May I now request our Senior Vice President and Head of Publishing, Sudha Satish, to anchor this session and relay the questions from the participants.
Thank you, Vani. It was a very enlightening session, Chaz, and I thoroughly enjoyed every bit of it.
Thank you.
With the new GPS that you have gifted us, we are sure to find new direction in the classroom.
Yeah, I hope so.
So since we don't have a lot of time left, I will go straight to the questions.
Okay.
You were talking about monotony and that teachers have to be spontaneous in the classroom. So here is a similar question. The teacher asks, I would like to be spontaneous and have fun in the classroom. But the school administration insists on having a set course and following the lesson plan faithfully. Yeah. Now, this is a problem that many teachers face. And there's another similar question, but it's from the other angle. This teacher says, most parents sit in for online classes and they feel that the teachers are not doing their job if the classes are loud and noisy and fun and unstructured.
Yeah, I mean, thank you for that, Sudha. These questions, are universal. These are not just Indian teachers, asking questions like that. Wherever I go, I keep hearing questions. I think, okay, I'll start with the last one. I think, unfortunately, many people have a very traditional, conservative, almost reactionary view of what good teaching is all supposed to be about. I was in Turkey not long ago, and I was explained that I was told that the way Turkish inspectors inspect classes is, they don't even go in. Okay, they put their ear to the door, and if the classroom is quiet, that's a good teacher. Mm-hmm. Well, you see what I mean? So there's lots of different stereotypes, okay, and even in Paris, sometimes, if we're being loud, because you ask the students to stand and mingle and experience the language in pairs or in groups, evidently, students, if you have 25 people, you can't be quiet, and you have people actually complain. So I don't have, obviously, I don't have a solution to that. I think, that sometimes, often, in fact, parents should be educated. They should be told, that language teaching has moved on. The language teaching is not a question of, rote learning and translation and people working in silence. Language teaching is about, getting the students to experience the language orally. And when you get 25, 30, 35 people, to talk to one another, evidently, it's going to be loud. But it's a good thing the students are loud. If the students are not loud, okay, when the students are loud, it doesn't mean that things are out of control. When the students are loud, it means, that they're engaged. So, but this is, the parents don't know because it's not their job. So I think, that on the one hand, perhaps it's the school's job, to educate the parents. And if the school doesn't do its job, well, maybe the teacher can. I know somebody here in Paris who, at the beginning of a new academic year, writes a letter to the parents, not the kids, to explain how she's going to work with the kids, and
that's nice.
Yeah, she does it. It's the same letter. She produces the same letter for years. It doesn't take her any time. She photocopies it. Okay, she sends it to and she hasn't had anybody complain. In fact, the kids love her. The parents understand what they're doing in class, and so this is so pedagogy has moved on. Pedagogy is different, and so but the problem is that the parents don't know, and so they're afraid of something that's new.
Yeah.
And the first question is very similar. I think, look, I train teachers now to be more creative in the classroom, but I think, that a teacher cannot be creative unless they work in an environment that is supportive of creativity. If the school environment doesn't support creativity, you're not going to be creative because, you're not going to want to take risks because you have to stick to lesson plan. So again, this is another stereotype. Lesson plan basically means, the teacher exercising all sorts of control over the learning process, all sorts of control over the students. But it really doesn't work like this.
That's
So
true.
yeah, we have a
But
lot of culture to change.
exactly. And I think the biggest challenge in an Indian classroom is that most classrooms have an average of 30 to 40 students,
How
um,
many?
and sometimes more. So
How
then
many?
that becomes a bit of a problem then to be very creative and spontaneous, I guess.
It's not,
So,
yes, it's a problem if, but you have to have the right classroom management skills.
mm,
Teachers need to be trained on how to deal with large groups, 50, 60 more. And you also have to have good facilities. By good facilities, I mean, a room that's spacious enough. Okay? So, but yeah, I'm not saying that teaching 50 or teaching 20 is the same thing. It's not. Okay, but I think that teaching 50 people, if you have good classroom management skills, and any teacher should have good classroom management skills, there's a lot more going on when you're teaching 50 people than when you teach 20 or 25 or 25 students. So I think it's doable. I've seen it done. It can be done. It is being done in many parts of the world. So I think it requires different skills. It requires more effort, certainly, but it can be done.
okay. Now, the next question, this is about motivation. Is there a way I can check whether my students are motivated or not? That is one. And also, how can I check my own level of motivation?
Yeah. How can you check your students are motivated? I guess the way they behave, the way they talk, the level of engagement, it is going to give it away. I mean, there isn't a test,
Mhm.
you can tell whether somebody's motivated or isn't, the level of enthusiasm, level of energy, whether they stay on task, whether they divert. I mean, yeah, there are ways of knowing, basically. How do you check your own motivation? This is an excellent question, in the sense that we don't talk enough about our motivation, but I think this is very important too. And I think in my research, in fact, in my books, I talk about the link between creative teaching and motivation. And I think that when a teacher is able to do creative, original ideas in class, this could result in increased motivation for the students, but also for us, because
Mm,
teaching is a very routinized activity. We tend to go through the different steps, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
yeah.
And if you do it 1 year, it's not a problem. If you do it 15 years, you're on the verge of burnout. So I think that I often suggest to teachers, to try more creative ideas, to try more original ideas, because it's a good way to stave off the routine.
Hmm, correct. Yeah.
Not the only way, but but yeah, we need to look after our motivation for sure, because if we don't, it means that we don't look after our well-being, and if we don't, we might get burned out, and we can't
Hmm,
afford to get burned out.
yeah, true. Okay, the other question is almost related. The children who were usually motivated in class seem listless, uninterested, or distracted during online sessions. So, how do I get them to respond as they did before? And Mr. Manish Kumar asks, how do I make an online class more interesting?
Well, I hope, okay, let's start with this last question. I hope I've given you some strategies on how to make your online class more interesting. I hope. There are many other ways, of course, but time was limited. The first question is, how do I? Well, first of all, are you sure that your students uh, are you sure that your students want to be online? Because we often, the problem with online, one of the problems with online teaching is that, I don't know about India, but in Europe, since March, okay, it's not just teaching that we're doing online, but it's social interactions. People are having birthday parties online. People are having family reunions online. People are having, endless meetings online. So there is this thing that, the Zoom is now part of our life. And it's the same thing for the students. Students get tired of screen time as much as we do. So I, I think it's a, you know, it is true that online it's much easier. I said this at the beginning of my talk. It is much easier to get distracted online than it is, you know, in a classroom, because, you know, students, I imagine, you know, when students are on Zoom, okay, if they don't look at the camera, I know they're looking at other windows that they have open. They may have messengers in the messenger, they may have some on WhatsApp. So, and there's nothing you can do in terms of, you can only hope with the activities that you propose, with the exercises that you ask the students to do, you can only hope that the students, you know, will be won over. But, you know, you have the the fundamental truth, Sudha, is this: you have no control over the students.
Yeah. Yes.
You know, I teach, you learn. It doesn't work like that.
Yeah.
People learn only if and when they want to learn. So all you can do is, you know, you could create, you know, a good environment, you know, an environment that is conducive to learning. But then it's like, you know, if I can use a tennis metaphor, you know, it takes two. If I hit the ball and then the ball doesn't come back because, you know, my opponent doesn't hit it back to me, we don't have a game.
Yeah.
But I can't do both. I can't hit the ball twice, you know, and it's the same thing here.
Yeah, it's almost as if our lives have moved online now. And I think teachers also feel a sense of anxiety
Yeah.
because they cannot actually see the students or control what they are concentrating on
Yeah.
or working on. So I think that makes a difference. We have Swati Singh asking, while adhering to a timetable, it often becomes difficult to cater to individual students' needs, especially while teaching online. So, how can this be worked out in a remote classroom environment?
Can you, sorry, I missed the beginning of your question. Sorry.
No, if there, we have time constraints
Yeah.
in an online class, and
Yeah.
it's usually shorter than the normal periods that we have in school.
Yeah.
So, that being the case, we find it difficult. I think teachers find it difficult to address individual students' needs. They are not able to give individual students as much attention as they would have done before.
Yeah.
So, how can they handle the situation?
Yeah. I think one thing that I do, for example, online is I use the chat box a lot, because when you use the chat box, you can actually talk with one individual student.
Hmm.
So if I see that, for example, a student is not appearing particularly interested, I send him a little text, just him, not the whole group. The whole
Hmm.
group doesn't
Hmm.
need to know. And I say, are you with us?
Hmm.
Are you okay? Is there anything I can do for you? Are you feeling
Hmm.
tired? Are
Hmm.
you feeling, you know what I'm saying? So that's one way of basically making the students, making everybody understand that you are paying attention to them individually. Yes, you're teaching a group. When you only have 45 minutes, it's very difficult to address the needs of one individual. But if you understand that, you know, one student or two students, you know, maybe feeling a bit left out, well, I think you have to intervene. And on Zoom, you know, if you use the chat box function, okay, you could
Mhm.
send them a message, you know, to one or two people and let them know that you've noticed. Let
Yeah.
them know that, you know, perhaps, you know, they need more support from you. Um, ask me if there's something you don't understand. What can I do for you? Should I go back and
Hmm.
repeat? It makes a big difference to that, because if you tell the whole group, okay, it's almost as if, you know, these people. It's almost as if, you know, you're singling them out. You know.
Hmm. Yeah.
Uh, but if you address the individual needs individually in a text, you know, sending a text in the chat box, and nobody else has to know, but the
Yeah.
student knows that, wow, he noticed, so he cares.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's very important that we register that they noticed.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. I think this will be the last question because I think we are running out of time now. This is a question from Vishal Singh. Very interesting. He says that he has to take classes, I think, both offline and online simultaneously. Okay, so his question is, while taking offline and online classes simultaneously, we tend to concentrate more on the offline students. So how do we engage both sets of students equally, and the ones who are online don't feel left out?
is teaching the same group, but half the group is at home,
Exactly.
half of the
Yes,
group is in class.
yes, yes, because that's a suggestion that has been put forward here in India, that or not all students come to school at the same time or on the same day. So
Yeah.
half of them remain at home one day, and the next batch comes in the other day. So
But this is because of the crisis,
yes,
or
with the crisis,
yeah,
yes.
it's being used in France too and in England. And to be honest with you, I don't see how you can make it work. There will always be a discrepancy. There will always be the situation is totally asymmetrical. I think it's perfectly human, normal for the teacher, to pay more attention to the people who are in the same classroom with him than to. So it doesn't mean that you have to leave. You have to neglect the people who are online, but it's easier to speak to people who are present with you than to people online. One way of doing it, which I found really useful, is to actually flip it, and to have the students online be in charge,
Oh, that's interesting. Hmm.
to have them say more, you know even in terms of instructions, send them, send, but this needs to be done before the lesson, like a little a list of questions, or a list of tasks that the
Mhm.
students online will have to do.
Mm.
This is to give them a little bit more power over the people who are actually in class. But I
Okay.
mean, but the fact that the teacher pays more attention to the students in the same classroom, I don't think it's a I think it's normal to a certain extent. I'm not saying that you should neglect people online, but I think it's normal. And the students online also need to be able to understand that. So one
Mm.
way of doing it is by flipping it and putting the students online in charge. And so the ones in class, they have a more passive role or a less active role, whereas the
Mm.
students in online, they have more of an active role, so they feel a little bit more they feel more active agents. I think that's a
Ah,
good way to
okay.
do it.
Okay. So, Mr. Vishal Singh, I hope that reassures you. So, Chaz, thank you so much. It
Thank you.
was
Thank you very
wonderful
much.
having the session with you. Uh,
Thank you.
thank you. And Vani, over to you.
Yeah, Chaz,
Yes,
you have effectively humanized the online teaching environment.
I hope
I
so.
think teachers are going to go away considerably enriched by all the strategies that you've shared with them. These are very challenging times of pandemic and change, but I'm
Yeah.
sure they will leave this webinar with considerable reassurance
Thank you.
that like you said, people teaching people. I think finally that's what really matters in this
Yeah.
environment too. Thank you so much. I'm sure we'll see you back as a presenter
Thank
once
you.
again for one
Yeah.
on education. And
Looking
we look
forward.
forward to other channels of synergy with Pilgrims, whose
Looking
philosophy
forward.
we followed with great belief in our publishing at Orient BlackSwan.
Looking forward to that too. Thanks for your hospitality. Thanks
Likewise,
everybody for
likewise.
listening and being with me.
Yeah,
Goodbye, India.
and
Bye bye.
goodbye. And
All
thank
the
you
best. Bye bye.
everyone
Stay
for
safe.
participating in today's webinar. We hope to see you all back again with Orient Black Swan 1 on education. Have a good day.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.